It's 7 o'clock. We're gonna get starting. This is pretty informal. There's no presentation. This is Sean O'Sullivan. He's from Professional Property Appraisers, who has been hired by the borough to conduct our revaluation. He's gonna give you kind of a broad overview of what the revaluation is, why we're doing it, and then you guys will have an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. Okay? Sean?
Yeah, so I'll just go through the pamphlet here. If you have any questions, I'm going. You can obviously, again, it's informal, so I can answer those questions as we go. This is just a quick, background here of kind of what's to happen. So if you want to follow along, just let me know if you have any questions while I'm going through it here. So basically, what is a revaluation? A revaluation is a program undertaken by the municipality to appraise all property within the taxing district according to its full market value, meaning what it can sell for in today's market. So basically what's happening now is your property is assessed from a previous assessment, either the last time that there was a full reevaluation, or if you've had an added assessment, if you've done work to your property, or if there's been any changes along the way. This process basically brings you back to what we believe your property would sell for in today's market. So that's what that means by full and fair market value of the property. Why is there a need for a reevaluation? The reevaluation program seeks to spread the tax burden equally throughout the municipality. So what that means is there's an overall budget within the town. Basically, how much do you owe to that budget based off of your property tax value? And again, that's based off of market and what we determine your market value to be from the sales that you would be comparable to. Some of the things that would affect the market would be changes in characteristics of the neighborhoods, fluctuations within the economy, changes of the style, custom, architect, size of your home, changes in zoning, any kind of permits, anything along those lines. So again, if there's any kind of changes within the value in certain parts of the town, the last time it was assessed, one part of town might have been higher in value than another part of the town. That could have shifted over that time period. So basically all that we're trying to do is determine what are the market shifts, and is there any major market shifts within the town that would determine there to be an adjustment made for those changes. Mm-hmm.
Why would the value of our individual properties matter? I mean, we all take advantage of the town's resources the same. So if my neighbor has a $2 million home and 2 kids in the school system, and I've got a $500,000 home, we all use the same roads. So why would that calculation? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's basically, to simplify it, whatever your property value is what you should be paying towards the taxes. So the more property value you have, the more you pay towards that overall budget within the township. That's the way, New Jersey decided it to be. And, that's the way that it works. So the lower the value, obviously, the lower the tax towards that overall budget. I understand what you mean. You're obviously getting the same,
We all get the same resources from the town.
Sure.
So why would my neighbor have to pay more than I would?
Just value. Again, that's just the way that New Jersey is set up. The more property value, the more tax, so, and I'll get into kind of how that plays into it. But, if you have a $200,000 home, obviously you're going to be paying less than somebody that does have a $2 million home. And that's basically all they're trying to determine is, who owes what to that budget based off of that value. But yeah, so, sure.
Is that basically true today though, also?
What's that?
That, we're paying our taxes based on our properties.
Yeah, so I always give the example, let's just say that this process was never done. Now, again, I was just speaking about different market shifts and the way things can change within the town. Let's just say you're paying what you're paying and your neighbor's paying what they're paying. Now, your neighbor's property may have gone up in value where maybe yours hasn't gone up as much, but if there was never a reval, there may not be a way for that to change. And basically, this is throwing everybody back into a big pot, if you look at it this way, and saying, let's start over and let's just determine what everybody owes based off of what this market is calling for and what your value is. And that's really all it's trying to do. It's trying to equal everything out within the town and determine who owes what to that overall budget within the town. And that's really what they're trying to achieve out of it. The budget is going to stay fairly close to what it is. They do have a cap on that every year that the state, regulates. So basically, that budget is going to stay close to what it is. It's just that value change will determine what you owe towards that budget. Some people will see a decrease from this. Some will stay the same. Some will unfortunately go up. But again, it's really based off of where that value falls to determine where your, taxes are led to be. So.
There's a property that's like his neighbor.
Mhm.
That no improvements done to. There's another property next to it that there's a ranch that was knocked down, a mini mansion was put up.
Sure.
Obviously, just by proximity, the value is gonna go up of that adjacent property. And even though no improvement has been made, I mean, obviously the quality of like that particular neighborhood block.
Yeah.
Stands to increase in value, but it seems like the additional burden for the person who haven't had any improvement done.
Well, so we take every individual property and try to compare it to the best comparisons we can. Meaning, we're not going to compare a small ranch to a mini mansion. It's just not comparable. So we try to take each individual property and look at the sales that make the most sense to determine, just like any appraisal would, to determine that market value. So it's not necessarily.
Specific neighborhoods within.
Yeah.
the borough.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, you can't compare a ranch to like, a 6 or 7 bedroom.
No, and again, we're going to try to find the best comparisons within that location. I mean, a location is your number one importance here. And sometimes, depending on the data and depending on the sales, it is a bit of a challenge. But I always say we're not going to take something that's not comparable and say this is comparable to determine that value. It has to be a comparable property, age, style, everything you can try to find. And again, sometimes it's harder than others depending on the data that's there. But that's when we make adjustments. We may have to make certain adjustments for a size or for a, bedroom count, bathroom count, things along those lines. And
How similar is this valuation to a bank?
very similar, very similar. Yeah, it's, we're going to try to find sales, couple sales. We're going to try to make those adjustments within those sales. We're going to compare condition. We're going to do, as much as we can to to determine that value. To say that it's going to be exactly the same, it is mass appraisal, so we do have a lot more values to look at, but we try to take all of this into account as we're valuing to determine that. And that's why it's a good thing to have us come in. I always say, because we're not going to get a true sense of the value without really determining what's going on within the full property.
So in the assessment, when you're talking about comparable sales, similar style homes, square footage,
Sure.
all that, I live on a county road.
Mm-hmm.
My, around the corner, the house around the corner, same style, same condition, it's gonna sell for considerably more.
Sure.
How is that?
Absolutely.
Is that part of your factor?
Yeah,
Or are you
so-
just looking at styles?
No, we actually come up with a determination of what kind of adjustment needs to be made for something like that. So if there's a property that has any kind of external issues, things like a busy road, power lines, anything that may affect the value of the property, we try to determine what a true market value would, or market adjustment would be for something like that. And then we will make an adjustment for all those properties that are on that road, or if they have any other economic issues with it that would affect the, value of the property.
So that leads me to my overarching question is, why is an inspection of my property necessary? If everything you've so far described
Mhm.
can be done via public record, assuming permits have been pulled, you're looking at real estate records, you would know just based on records without coming into somebody's home.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if the condition is definitely something we can't tell from the outside. I understand what you mean in terms of permits and, we should know, but that's not always the case. And it's always one of those things that if we're trying to put a value on the property, and I always give the analogy, let's just say you're going to buy a property. Are you driving by the outside and just saying, I'm good with that, I'm going to buy that property now? You want to get a full scope of what's going on within the property, outside of the property, the whole property in general, before you want to buy that. And really, to determine a true value of the property, you have to get a full scope of what's going on. Now, sometimes you're right. Maybe, it is the way that we have it on record and we're verifying it and we're saying, yes, that's correct. But we do run into it where there are issues and, we do have to change things, and we're accounting for the, condition that's there. And, again, we're mainly just trying to make sure that before we put a value on it, that it is correct on record. And, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that whatever value we're giving you really reflects what's on the property.
Is it fair to say that somebody, the condition of the home, so somebody that's investing money into their home could potentially pay more?
Again, it's-
Deciding to use that money elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, so I always tell people, really, as an appraisal company, we're trying to determine market value. We don't really have much to do with the tax. I know the tax is the main factor of what, everybody's concerned with, and I totally understand that. That's, human nature. I feel the same way. But in terms of an appraisal company, we're just trying to determine in today's market, what is your property truly worth? And that's really our main job within this. I mean, we're just trying to tell you, as of today, what could you sell your property for? And that's really all we're hired to do. Now, obviously, it will affect the taxes. But again, if your property is redone and it's obviously going to probably be worth more, and the sales that we're comparing you to are probably going to be very similar to that. It's not so much a punishment or, whatever the case may be. It's just trying to say, based off of what we see within the property, this is what we determine the value to be from the sales.
Well, it seems a little arbitrary considering if you have two similar homes.
Mhm.
And you're really looking at square footage and property size. If my neighbor decides to, just have basic kitchen and bathroom fixtures, and I decided, hey, you know what, I don't need, I think I would prefer to have quartz countertops and,
Sure.
a molded sink in the bathroom, because that's what my wife likes.
Mhm.
That, I could potentially be paying 10 or 15% more, even though.
Yeah, I mean, again, though, if you were to sell your property, would you be able to get more for the value if you do those things? That's what we're trying to determine. It's not so much, again, on the taxes, because we're an appraisal company. We're trying to determine if you put that work into it, you're probably going to have more equity in your property than somebody that doesn't. And again, that's really our main concern. It's not so much, again, you have to pay more in taxes. It's what is that value?
Well, what you're describing is a little bit contradictory to the way that this was introduced, because you described this as having the tax base being equitable across all residents. And now it sounds like you're describing ways to find nuances so that some residents are charged more than others.
Well, again, it's not charged. It's a value.
It's a fee. I mean, I pay $15,000 a year in taxes, or $16,000 a year in meter. It's a fee. I don't pay my taxes, they'll take my house and kick me out of town.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I don't disagree. Again,
That's the bottom line.
yeah, and the taxes, are controlled by that budget, and, whatever the budget is within the township is, how this is all derived. But again, as an appraisal company, we're trying to determine, again, your true market value. And, we're just saying, based off of what we're seeing within, your specific property and what the comparisons are, this is what your market value is.
As part of the appraisal, I mean, we just happened to have a gentleman come today.
Sure.
I mean, it really just count rooms.
Well,
And
yeah.
what else you got on your property.
Mhm.
You may pick up square footage from, some information in town, right?
No, it's just exterior measurements. So the walkthrough is mainly just to determine overall condition. Now, the main thing we're concerned about is does that square footage match from the exterior measurements? So to give you an example, we may have, older homes that have maybe an attic space on the third floor. Now, from the outside, we're gathering that square footage through those measurements. We cannot tell whether something like an attic is finished. That would affect your square footage. So when we walk through the property, we're determining, I know it looks like we're just counting rooms, but we're trying to look at overall condition. We're trying to determine if that square footage does match the outside. And we are counting the rooms, but the main focus is does that square footage match what the exterior measurements are reflecting? Now, we also look at basements. Basements are not considered square footage, but obviously it does add value to the property if there is a finish on the basement. So to answer your question, really, it's trying to make sure that everything as a whole makes sense compared to what we're measuring on the outside.
Are you starting from scratch when you come for our homes? Are there past records or past reevaluations you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean,
Easements,
Yeah.
the railroad track.
Yeah, we have the tax maps. So obviously, the tax maps are something that we reference quite a bit. for things like easements and, those type of
I'm
situations.
going back to the last evaluation was 30-some years
Yeah.
ago.
I mean, we have
My
records.
husband did come
Okay.
and challenged it,
Uh-huh.
and they brought the taxes down because of 3 easements.
Okay.
And utilities that have easements on our property.
Sure.
Do you have access to that information?
Yeah. If they're on there, we have that. I mean, if they're on the tax maps and they're there,
So that would go into the formula.
we would have to make an adjustment for that at the time of the valuation. Yes. So we would try to determine what a market adjustment is for something like an easement, looking at sales that have easements and try to determine what kind of value adjustment we need to make for something like that. And then we would reflect that within the
But you
value.
look back on past records.
Well, we'll have the information. The tax maps always has the easements on their records. So as long as the tax maps are correct, which, we find that it's usually,
I was depreciated my property.
Yeah.
30-some years ago.
Mhm.
We challenged it and they agreed and it came down.
Yeah.
Do you have access to that information?
I have the old record for the property record card and your old value. Now, what was done in the past in terms of a value, obviously it's not reflective of this market, so it would be adjusted for now, but the easement would still be adjusted for. Yes. Mhm.
Didn't you say, do you have the adjustments? Not
Well, it's the adjustments are really based off of a market. So whatever the adjustment was the last time is not going to be reflective in this market because the markets change. So adjustments are derived from markets. So, what was a adjustment then probably is not going to be enough now because the adjustments change, so.
Once you get to our evaluation, and you
Mhm.
really actually say, this was the value X, and we have to make these adjustments based on.
You're going to get an overall value. It's going to be a letter at the end with basically the old value, old tax, new tax. Now, at the time, you'll have a number to call. We can go further in depth with those type of adjustments at that time. But the actual letter will be fairly generic. But, we do, if you call, we can go into
So
all
if I
that.
were to challenge anything, am I going through you or?
Yeah, so there's an informal review process. Basically, what happens is we'll send that letter out. You would call and you would basically say, I believe my property value is too high. Now, at that time, we do ask for the homeowner to provide sales to determine whether we can change that number or not. So we would ask you to, provide us with 3 to 5 sales of properties that you would feel comparable to really reflect what you believe the value would be. And then at that time, we can change the number. Now, after that, if, you're still unsatisfied, if we don't change it or we change it maybe not to the degree that you're requesting, there is a county appeal. You can file that on a county appeal up until May 1st.
So that's more formal.
That's formal. So you would submit that through the county. It would be a court, case. They would, you would have a counsel and basically you would present your case. But we typically try to take into account if the homeowner has, enough information to show that, it can be changed. We try to come up with a solution at that point. So.
The appeal process doesn't cost anything?
I don't. Every county is a little different. I believe it's somewhere anywhere between $10 to $25, somewhere around there. It's now you can get an appraiser, you can get an attorney. Obviously, that's something that would be your choice, and they would come in with you, and they would present your case for you. But it's not necessary if you don't want to go that route. So, he's been.
So I apologize for coming in and giving you late. What is the look back period for comps and how many comps do you take?
So we look from October 1st to October 1st. So this is going to be put into effect for 27, meaning we're going to be looking from October 1st of 25 to October 1st of 26. So anything that has sold that would be comparable would be in that time range.
And then is there any adjust, so if you think about look back periods,
Mhm.
Depending on the market environment, either you could be in a rising market
Sure.
environment or so do you do any adjustment for
A time adjustment?
Yeah.
I mean, so we try to determine that if we can. We have that year period. If we see a substantial decrease within that year period, we'll try to determine some kind of adjustment. But I mean, that year, is it does give us a good indicator for the most part. I mean, I know if you're doing a bank, are you an appraiser by any chance, or no? I know if you're doing a bank appraiser or appraisal, or sometimes you can go further back than that year period or 2 year period, depending on the data. Typically, you will see a time adjustment for something like that, but within the year, it's fairly close. I mean, I know the market has been, crazy over the last few years, and there's been some major jumps, and there hasn't been a gradual increase like we have seen in the past. But to answer your question, if we feel that it's suitable from the data that we have, we try to make some kind of adjustment. If we feel that it's not, and we're not seeing enough information from that data, then we'll keep it within that year.
When you finish the revaluation,
Mhm.
will you also have access to like anyone else in town to be able to see like what their
Yeah.
revaluation was, what the difference in their taxes was? I know you mentioned that you want to appeal it.
Mhm.
Say that I want to compare one property versus another. Can we base upon that? Or-
No, it has to be from the sales. So the county will tell you the same thing. You cannot compare assessment to assessment, just because the difference is, I mean, there's many reasons why, but the sales are the indicator of your value within that October to October date. So in order to come in for the appeal, you would have to submit sales within that time period. Now, if your properties that you're bringing up and the assessments that you're bringing up have sold within that time period, then yes, you can use them, but it would only be within that time period. And again, they would be the best comparisons to your property in terms of comparables. So, only if they sold within that time period, that October 1st to October 1st.
One of the problems we have is that 2025 saw one of the lowest inventories on record.
Mhm.
So, sales prices are getting like 15-20%
Sure.
over ask.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's definitely like an inflated number. And then, our reevaluation is going to be now based on those.
Yeah, and this has been a concern. So the state regulates the difference between the assessment and market value. And when
You're taking it from comps. So it's like.
Well, so the issue is, and I agree with what you're saying. Obviously, there has been a lack of inventory, and this is why the market has increased by so much drastically over the, yes. So, but what is regulated here is this assessment compared to what the market value is from these sales. Once you fall below a certain, they call it a ratio, the state steps in, they say your assessments are too far from market value. And they are basically the ones that mandate it. I'm not sure if New Providence, I don't think they were mandated, but they felt that their ratio was falling below a certain point that the state would, eventually feel that there would be a need for this. So what happens is, if you see over the next few years that there's a major drop within the value, or if there's a decrease within the value, they may have to do this again, depending on where that ratio falls. So instead of being below the 100%, if the values dropped, you would start seeing it be over 100%. And that's again where the state would step in and they would say these would have to be reassessed again. Hopefully it stabilizes and there's no major increase or decrease over the next few years where it wouldn't have to happen again. But you as an individual homeowner always have the right every year to appeal these values. So if you monitor it and see that, okay, my value maybe is dropping from what my assessment is saying, you have every right to go in every year and say, these are the sales I'm showing that it's basically dropped since there was a reevaluation. Can we adjust this number?
So, for the actual calculation,
Mhm.
are individuals doing this, or are you relying on computer algorithms to take the first crack at it, and then it goes to?
You mean the valuation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is systems that help us come up with the value, but in terms of the final value, we are trying to look everything over. So we will have a team on it to basically try to determine, what it's worth after, we come up with that initial number. So that's where the adjustments come in. That's where, we try to adjust them at the time that we're looking at them. Yes. Yeah.
So, to the gentleman's question earlier,
Mhm.
the issue of looking, as an example, my house versus a neighbor's house, at the moment I feel my taxes are far higher than my neighbors.
Sure.
That should all be equalized after you do a whole revaluation of the entire town, theoretically, right?
Theoretically, yes. Mhm.
Right, okay. And then the second part of that is, based on your current taxes today,
Mhm.
is there some threshold? So I remember years ago, this is going back to 2013, when we did a major renovation on our house.
Mhm.
And I felt like the valuations were not in line with what I thought the house is worth.
Mhm.
And we went down to appeal it. And of course, they have this policy where they will only reduce it if it was outside of 25% or something like that, where the valuation was off by 25%. You are never gonna meet that threshold, never. Okay, so my point is, if your taxes are X and the reevaluation comes in at Y, will you keep them the same if it doesn't meet a certain threshold, or how is that?
So you're talking about something that's called the common level range.
Right.
In a average year that you apply for an appeal, there's something called the common level range. There's a 15% swing in either direction. In a reevaluation year, that does not exist. It's at 100% market value. So you, as the homeowner, all you have to show is that your property isn't what it's worth based off of that 100%. You don't have to worry about that 15% swing in either direction. So basically, the time to appeal would be now. Any year following, you will have that common level. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, again, the reval is at 100%, and again, that's all you have to prove in this process. So no, you can do it every year. I mean, so well, every year is going to be based off of this assessment from this point on, unless you do work to your property or you. So we'll probably have the values out sometime by November of next year. December, we'll have probably mostly everything finalized. We'll have everything to the assessor sometime after that. And then you won't see anything affected from it until the summer of 27. So it's quite a while away, but. So same thing as I said before, it's the informal process. We'll give you an indication of how long that will be on the letter that we send to you at the time that you receive that. Now, if you don't do anything at that point, you still have the following few months until May to apply for the county appeal. So
I think what the question was, when the homeowners can expect to receive their letters.
Mhm.
That's going to be much sooner than next November.
no,
December.
it's going to be November of next year. So you won't have anything until that point. So the issue was trying, because we just obviously started the data collection. There's a period here where we could have tried to finish before the end of the year, beginning of the year, somewhere around there, but it probably wouldn't have been enough time. So it has to be November of next year, and everything has to be pushed to 27.
So what happens if we make the decision that we would prefer not to have our own inspected?
So, I mean, based off of what information we have, we'll try to go off of that. Obviously it's going to be an estimation because, we don't truly know. Typically we'll look within the market within your area and see, if there's a lot of properties that have had work done or whatever the case may be. We may estimate it based off of what we're seeing within that location. Square footage, again, might be estimated. It could be a case where, if we're unsure if there's any livable space that we're just unaware of, that could be estimated, depending on, what we're seeing. So to answer your question, there may be estimations for you if you don't, have us come in, because we just don't know.
You're saying assumptions, okay, neighborhoods, neighboring properties have had
Yes.
upgrades, well, you probably have them too.
Yeah, and we'll have to base it off of, estimations.
So it could be very detrimental not to let them in.
I will say that at the time of the appeal, typically the county will actually not hear the appeal unless there is an inspection. So I always say it is beneficial if you feel that the value is not suitable for your home. It is beneficial to have the inspection because then it can be discussed.
When the letters go out, is that, I think you said it includes the taxes. Is that based on the new tax rates, or is that going to be based on existing tax rates?
It's based off of the previous budget. So obviously we don't have anything to do with the taxes themselves. We're, not involved with that process. So we'll base it off of the previous year's budget, and we'll give you a rough indication of where it will be from that. But like I said before, there is a cap that, they're not allowed to adjust the budget over. So we're usually fairly close to what, the estimation is at that time.
So it seems to me like that their taxes would be more than what they'll be in 2027. If the rates are based now on our current assessments of our house, and you're gonna go with.
Well, no, so that they have to be, the rates will be adjusted. So,
When, before the letters go out, though, that's where.
well, the rate will be, again, we're not really sure of the budget, but we have the previous year's budget. So we'll take that and we'll take all the new values from every single property and basically come up with a total. And that's in your pamphlet here, if you want to see, that gives you indications of how that works. But we'll take those two numbers and we'll divide that out. So it takes the budget, you divide the budget by or you take the budget and divide by the overall values, and that will give you the new rate. So anytime the values increase, that rate has to drop equally because you can't collect more than what the budget is calling for. So there's always a, redistribution no matter what within this process. And that's why some people benefit. That's why some people stay the same. And unfortunately, some will go up. But that's the key to it is a redistribution more than anything. So. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some difficult ones that are unique. No matter what, we will find sales, and then we'll just have to make adjustments. We may rely more on the adjustments on the unique properties because we have to determine that value. We can't just make it up. So it has to be, we still have to use sales. And, again, it's really dependent on the data that we have to determine that. But the sales that we're using, we're going to do the best we can, and we'll try to figure out what those market adjustments will be at that time to, reflect that in the appraisal. So.
Let's go back to the inspection process. When the inspector shows up,
Mm-hmm.
are they coming in blind, or do they have a record?
Yeah, there is a record. I mean, we're taking it as we make sure that it's our information, obviously. So we're remeasuring everything. We're inspecting everything all over again. And we're basically saying to ourselves, this is our work now. We're not taking anything for granted, but we do have, some information. Mhm.
I had the process happen.
Okay.
The gentleman was there 5 to 10 minutes.
Sure.
I did get the sense that he knew that I had X amount of bedrooms and bathrooms. I mean, it was great, very simple process. But
Mhm.
just curious now.
Yeah, I mean, and again, sometimes, it may be a case where they're trying to, not rely too much on that. They want to make sure that it is their own work. So, they're trying to go in there and they're trying to say, what do you have exactly? And then, they'll go and update that record to reflect it. And that's, again, there's nothing too extreme about this inspection, but they're trying to get an overall feel of what the property entails. Again, it's condition, again, the room counts does play a part, but the main factor is that square footage making sense. And, we are checking for condition and those things. So.
And checking for like central air.
Yeah, we check for central air.
House generators, is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, that depends on the town, really. Air conditioning. You know what? We could look into that, but air conditioning, yes. Generators, you know, that's still up in the air for what kind of value something like that would be. Same thing with like solar, you know, those type of things. You know, that we try to look into that. If there looks like there's a market adjustment needed for something like that, then you know we will try to pick that up. But mhm.
What constitutes a bedroom?
So that's always a good question. We've had this issue in the past where some of these older Victorian homes have no closets. And we hear that a lot. That bedroom has no closets, so it can't be a bedroom. Now, typically, we are trying to determine it based off of the use of it and what kind of utility it has. So, you know, if it's used as a bedroom, we're probably picking it up as a bedroom. It does have to fit a certain size. I believe it's 8 by 10, I think, or above. But really, all in all, I mean, it's not as critical as that square footage. You know, we'll try to adjust for it, but the square footage is really the main thing that we're trying to take.
So if I have a room in my basement that has closets and a room of egress, and I just so happen to have a bed in there and a treadmill, is that gonna be counted as a bed?
Yeah, I mean, for the basements, it's typically just the area that we're picking up because of the, you know, the square footage isn't really considered to be livable down there. I know what you mean as an egress. But for us to consider that livable space, it would have to be fully above grade. So you'll have sometimes where, like to give you an example, there might be like a bi-level where the front, you know, looks like it's underground, and then the topography goes down in the back, and you can walk straight out. We typically won't consider that square footage because the front is, you know, not, it's under grade still.
You have a percentage threshold for below grade?
What's that?
You have a percentage threshold for below
Just all the way around. So like if you can't fully walk out in the front, fully walk out in the back, then we can't consider it livable space.
You won't consider that a bed?
No, I mean, we'll just pick it up as the area. So, you know, if it's 80% complete, if it's 50% complete. Yeah.
The ground comes up halfway to the bed.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's dependent on how the ground is, but no, I mean, like that wouldn't probably be considered. We would probably just call it a finished area.
So it doesn't matter if it's got a bed, they don't just look at it. and say,
No, I mean, again, it's
bedroom.
bedrooms are not as critical as the overall square footage. I mean, really, that's the main thing that we're concerned about within the inspection. I mean, you know, that's key to what we're doing. Bathroom counts, you know, and all those type of things. But
What about like a walk-up?
so that's kind of what I was telling you about earlier with the example that I gave you. A walk-up attic will be considered livable if you have enough space and it's obviously finished and you can live in it. That's one thing that we are looking for. Now, those are the type of situations you were asking about estimations. Typically, we will estimate that complete if we don't get into the property because, you know, we just don't know. So that would affect your square footage. So those are the things that we, you know, are really critical to our inspection when we're doing them. So. Sorry. Hmm?
Yeah, sorry, I came in late, so
No, it's okay.
So basically, I haven't had my appointment yet, we were gone, they're coming back.
Sure.
Basically, they come in with the room count, get square footage.
Yeah, the majority of the inspection is going to be on the exterior, which, you know, as a homeowner, you can walk around with them, but that's not needed. So, yeah, if they left your card, typically we do it unless we're told not to. So you probably did have that done. So yes, the interior is pretty basic. There's no pictures. There's nothing along those lines. It's just a very quick, you know, walkthrough trying, again, to determine, you know, what actually is within the property. And that's really all we're trying to achieve from it. So it's quick. Yeah.
So the second question,
Mhm.
I might miss this too. So you said there's a budget, right, and dividing out like space on the land or all the houses. How do like all the new developments come into scope with this?
Well, as long as they're complete, then we're valuing them.
Even like all these new developments that are going up, or?
Well, if they're not complete and they're not CO'd, then, you know, we would have to wait until They are complete. Now, what would happen later on, they would get something called an added assessment, where after the reevaluation, the value would be added after the fact, and they would then get their assessment.
Would the hours be reassessed accordingly? Because I mean, there's a ton of units going up, right? I don't know.
So the rate will be adjusted, after every year when the budget is determined. So if they become a rateable, that they will again be put into the mix, and they will adjust for that value.
Would an appeal involve an additional visit by the inspector?
No, if you had your original one, then no. I mean, you're good to go from that point on.
So it sounds like some people have already had people come.
Sure.
How will we be notified? Do they leave a card?
Yeah, we'll leave a card if you're not home, and then there's a number on the card that you can set up an appointment at your convenience, and we would come back out and do the interior. So, and it should be soon. We're pretty much through most of the town. So I would say if you haven't had it done, it's probably coming very quick, within the next week or two, I'd say. Well, there'll be some more notifications, so just look out for it.
Maybe you can comment on your experience.
Mhm.
This is a zero-sum game, so
Mhm,
the
mhm.
taxes that we collect is not gonna change, it's just how it's redistributed.
Sure.
As you said, the third stays the same, third might go up, third might come down. You described a situation when you might get down or go up.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll see it a lot where there's a lot of industry. Industry plays a big part in this. The towns where there's a lot of industry and commercial will take a lot of the hit because, again, their values are going to be much higher than those of residential. So we have had in the past where a lot of the commercial or industry has taken almost that full burden, and almost all the residentials have come down. Again, each town is very different, and the makeup is very different. But really, that's just one example of how it can happen. But really, again, it's just a shift within the values to determine it. And how we determine the shift is we look at the overall average adjustment in the town, and I'll give you some basic numbers. I think I spoke about this before. Let's just say on average, the town goes up 50%. Now, if your individual property from the sales only goes up 40%, you're going to see a decrease in taxes. If it's around that 50%, then you're going to stay about the same. If you go above the overall average, then you'll see an increase in taxes. And again, I don't know what that number will be until we look at the markets and we look at the sales, but it might go up 60%, it might go up 40% on average, but we don't know yet. But that's really how we determine who goes down, who stays the same, and who goes up in taxes. So there's always guaranteed to be a portion that does see a decrease in taxes from this. So there will be people that benefit from this process. So. Yeah, that was a tricky time. Yeah, for sure.
It's not fair to assume somebody, Devin said, we did a nice renovation in your house, you got assessed when you submitted your permits
Mhm.
to CFO. It's not fair to say that that person's been paying a higher tax rate, or it's all based on the market value.
Yeah, again, it's a way of basically starting over. Now, at the time that there was an added assessment, it was put on for the ratio at that time. So even though there was an added assessment, it wouldn't have been to market value. It would have been whatever the ratio was. So if the town was at, let's just say 85% at the time that you had your added assessment, it would have been determined at 85%. This is what the adjustment should be from that. So you'll probably still see an increase, but maybe not as much of an increase as if you hadn't done it, and you may actually benefit because of that added assessment. Again, every situation is completely different, and but we do see that happen from time to time. So, any other question?
You said they'll just come to the door one day and knock, and that's.
Yeah, I mean, it's during I think it's 9 to 4. Typically, they're out. We give tax maps to each inspector, and basically they take the tax maps and they follow along the tax map, and so they'll be in your area for that day. And if you're not home, then you can give us a call, and again, you can schedule when it's convenient for you. But if you, like I said before, if you haven't had it done, it's probably coming quick because I believe all the map pages have been given out. So it's going to be soon.
Overall, what percentage of properties get inspected versus not inspected?
Every town, we've just spoke about this, every town is completely different. It really, there, to say that there is a standard is, I really can't. I mean, it is sometimes completely at random. I mean, you really have no idea going in. We typically try to get into 80%, but we've found that after COVID, that's been a bit of a challenge.
Does it skew your numbers if we have a percentage that you can't get access to?
Not so much, but it's hard to value homes without getting into them because you just can't get the full perspective of what's going on. We typically will see if there's a low entry rate, we will see at the time of the informal reviews after you get your letter, and we will see a decent amount at that point that will reschedule after that because either they're unhappy with the value or they feel that they would like to have it adjusted. Then we will have to come out at that point. So we will get a certain percentage after we send out the letters after the fact, and that's always the case.
I thought you had just said that the people who don't allow entry, they go through the appeal process and they won't come back out.
If we get in originally, then we won't come back out. If we don't, then we would have to come back out. Anybody else? We're used to it. Yeah, I mean, it's always a tough decision, for the towns to make, and it's always a hard process. And I always tell people, as an appraisal company, we're just trying to determine your value, and that's really all that we're in charge of. Now, again, we know that it affects the taxes, but we try to look at it and say, what would you be able to get for your property? And that's really our main job within the process. So. Oh, I thought you meant the process itself. Yeah. Yeah. And we have no problem taking calls and explaining it. We're well aware that, this doesn't happen every day. So we try to keep everybody informed as much as we can. And we have no problem answering questions when they come up. Mm-hmm.
Is there a schedule like follow-up meeting for the next month or whatever?
I don't, not as of right now. But again, I mean, if you personally have any questions, don't hesitate to call our office. We can explain anything. Mm-hmm.
But really, we won't know anything new until all the assessments are done, all the calculations are done.
Yeah.
And letters come out.
So we have to wait for that time period, that sampling period is what we call it, from October 1st to October 1st to happen before we could put those values on. So, we can't technically do much before that period anyway. So yeah, you won't have any information before that. So.
You said that was November.
Yeah, depending, I mean, either November or December typically is when they go out. Mm-hmm. All right. Everybody good? Well, thanks a lot, guys. If you have any questions, just give us a call. What's that? Don't put, my name is Sean Sullivan.